The first time I saw him, I thought he was just another quiet neighbor, the kind that kept to himself, the kind you barely noticed. Our neighborhood wasn't the type where people made an effort to be friendly. Everyone worked long hours, came home, and disappeared behind closed doors. Still, there was something about the man who moved into the house across the street that immediately made me uneasy. His arrival was unremarkable. A plain moving truck pulled up one damp afternoon, the kind of day where the sky looked more like ash than clouds. I remember standing by my window, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, watching him unload his belongings. No family, no friends, no movers. Just him, thin, pale, with long arms that moved like shadows stretching across the pavement. The house he moved into had been empty for years. People said it was cursed, though that was probably just the kind of gossip neighbors loved to pass around. The previous owner, an older man, had died alone inside. Nobody found him for weeks. By the time the police entered, the smell had leaked into the street, and for a long time afterward, no one could walk past without remembering it. That house had always looked wrong, somehow, too dark, even in the daytime. The new neighbor didn't seem bothered. He carried in boxes that looked too heavy for one person, his back bent but steady. He worked until night fell, no lights on inside, no music, no sound. I remember thinking, how does he see in there? But eventually, I shrugged it off. People had their quirks. Maybe he was just a loner. It wasn't until the second week that I noticed the watching. I had been up late, scrolling on my phone in bed, when a strange feeling crawled up my spine. You know that instinct, the one that makes you look up because you know someone is staring at you. I pulled back the curtain slightly, and there he was, standing at his window, not moving, just staring. His room was dark, but his outline was clear, too clear. It was like the shadows bent around him, making his figure sharper. I froze. My first instinct was to drop the curtain and pretend I hadn't seen him, but I couldn't look away. His face was pale, almost glowing in the darkness, though I couldn't make out his eyes. We stayed like that for a long time, me at my window, him at his. No gestures, no wave, no sign that he even cared that I had noticed. Just stillness. Eventually, I shut the curtain and told myself not to think about it. People look out their windows all the time, right? It didn't have to mean anything, but I barely slept that night. The next morning, I checked again. His window was empty. The curtains were drawn tight, like they had never been open. But that night, he was there again. Night after night, it became a ritual. He would stand there, perfectly still, while I sat frozen in my room, pretending not to see. Sometimes I told myself I was imagining it, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But when I finally dared to peek again, his figure was always there. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I raised my phone and tried to snap a picture. The moment I lifted it, he moved for the first time. Not away, not to wave, not even to hide. He leaned forward, pressing his pale face closer to the glass. And though the distance between us was too far for me to see clearly, I swear his mouth stretched into a smile. My hand trembled so badly that the photo blurred into nonsense. After that, I kept my curtains closed. I told myself I wouldn't look again, wouldn't give him the satisfaction. But closing the curtains didn't help, because now I could hear him. It started with soft noises at night, like footsteps pacing inside his house when everything else in the street was quiet. Then, tapping, slow, deliberate taps, like someone drumming their fingers against a window pane. And then whispers, too faint to understand, too distorted to be real, but close enough that I sometimes thought they were inside my own head. Days passed in uneasy silence. I never saw him outside. never heard his door open. The house remained dark, always dark, yet the sense of being watched never left me. One evening, I came home late from work. The street was empty, every house dark except his. For the first time, a light glowed faintly from his upstairs window, a yellow, sickly light, as though filtered through stained glass. I paused on the sidewalk, staring up at it, and that's when I heard it. The sound of my name, faint, drawn out, almost like a sigh. My name, whispered from that house. I ran inside and locked every door. After that, I began to notice things moving in my own house. A chair slightly out of place, a window unlocked that I swore I had closed. Once, I came home to find my kitchen light on, though I never left it that way. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, just small changes, the kind meant to remind you that you're not alone. One night, I woke to the sound of my front door creaking open. My heart slammed in my chest as I reached for the baseball bat under my bed. I crept down the hallway, every shadow stretching too long, every creak of the floor screaming in my ears. The door was closed, perfectly closed, but the chain lock dangled loose, swaying slightly, as if it had just been touched. I didn't sleep at all that night. By now, I was sure of one thing. He wasn't just a neighbor. He was something else, something that didn't belong here, and he was inside my life in ways I couldn't explain. The worst part, no one else seemed to notice. When I asked around, neighbors shrugged. The guy across the street? Haven't seen him, they'd say. Or, that house has been empty for years. Empty for years. But I had seen him. I had heard him. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I could feel his breath just outside my bedroom door. I started keeping a journal, desperate to prove to myself that this was real. Every sound, every shadow, every whisper. The entries blurred into each other, my handwriting jagged with fear. Some mornings, I woke to find new lines written in ink I didn't remember using. Lines that didn't sound like me at all. He is watching. He is waiting. Open the door. I didn't write that. I know I didn't. And yet, it was in my handwriting. The last entry before I stopped keeping the journal still haunts me. When I opened it one morning, every page had been torn out except one. In thick, black strokes, a single sentence remained. You've already let me in. I burned the journal that night, but the watching hasn't stopped. In fact, it's closer now. Sometimes, when I wake suddenly in the dark, I see him standing at the foot of my bed, just for a second, pale, smiling, waiting, and then he's gone. But I know it's only the beginning. I didn't step outside that day. The suitcase remained by the door, untouched. Every time I reached for it, the journal seemed to pulse in the corner of my vision, like a living thing daring me to try. By evening, the sky bled into a deep, unsettling red before finally sinking into black. I sat in the living room with every light on, the journal lying closed on the coffee table. I refused to open it. I refused to write. At 1:0 a.m., the noises began again. At first it was faint, scratching, like nails dragging against the walls. Then it grew louder, closer, until it seemed to come from every corner of the house. I pressed my palms against my ears, rocking back and forth, whispering, "It's not real, it's not real." Then the whispers started, not just my name this time, sentences, full phrases, overlapping and hissing through the air. Open the door. We're waiting. Write it down. I couldn't take it anymore. My hands trembled as I grabbed the journal, flipping it open without meaning to. The pages were blank, completely blank, but my pen moved anyway. It glided across the paper as if pulled by invisible strings. I tried to let go, but my fingers wouldn't obey. Words spilled out in jagged lines, sentences I didn't form. When I finally gathered the strength to throw the pen across the room, I looked down at the page. It was a map, a detailed sketch of my street. Every house marked, every window drawn. At the center was mine. Scribbled beside it, in dark, heavy strokes, were the words, "First offering." My breath hitched. What did that mean? I slammed the journal shut, heart hammering, and stumbled back. But the scratching stopped. The whispers faded. The silence that followed was somehow worse, heavy, expectant. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I woke to knocking. Slow, steady knocks at the front door. I froze in bed, praying it was a dream. But the knocking continued, louder this time. Gathering every ounce of courage, I crept down the hall, bat in hand. The knocking stopped the moment I touched the doorknob. My heart pounded in my ears. I pulled the door open with a shout, ready to swing. Nobody. Just the empty street, the early gray light of dawn. But when I looked down, the journal was there again, waiting on the mat. Its pages flapped gently, though there was no wind. I picked it up, against all reason, and flipped it open. A new entry filled the first page in large, messy letters. Tonight, and daunting that, I slammed the door shut and locked it, pressing my back against the wood. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. What was happening tonight? The rest of the day stretched on endlessly. I jumped at every sound, every creak of the house. I kept the journal locked away, though I knew it wouldn't matter. My phone stayed silent. My neighbors were nowhere to be seen. It felt like the entire street had emptied, leaving me trapped in some abandoned corner of reality. By nightfall, I couldn't fight the exhaustion. My body dragged me towards sleep despite the fear clawing at my chest. I collapsed onto the bed, bat still clutched in my hands. And that's when I heard it, a soft voice, inches from my ear, though no one was in the room. Look at the window. My eyes darted open. Against every instinct, I turned my head. He was there, not across the street this time, not behind glass, but standing just outside my bedroom window, his face pressed close, pale skin stretched too thin, teeth glinting in the moonlight. His eyes, those black, endless pits, locked onto mine. I screamed, stumbling back, but when I blinked, the window was empty. The journal lay open on my nightstand. Fresh ink stained the page, the letters still wet. Second offering. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath, as though I'd been running for miles. The journal pulsed in my hand like a beating heart. I wanted to fling it into the void outside, but something in me knew it would only return like it always did. The silence pressed down on me, unbearable, until I heard it. A soft scratching. At first, I thought it was coming from the journal, but then I realized it was under the floorboards. Slow, deliberate, scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound traveled beneath me, circling the living room like something hunting from below. My skin prickled with every step it took. Then, without warning, the scratching stopped directly beneath my feet, and I heard the whisper, "Write her name." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the couch. My voice cracked, desperate. "No, I won't." The journal fell open on the coffee table. The blank page gleamed white in the dim light, the pen rolling toward me, and then ink bled across the page on its own, letters forming without my touch. "Write her name." The words smeared, then multiplied, covering the page in frantic black scrawls. My vision blurred, my chest tightened, my hand moved against my will, fingers curling around the pen. "No," I whispered again. "I won't do it." The lights flickered, the air grew icy cold, and then knock, knock, knock. I froze. The sound came from the front door. 3 slow, heavy knocks. My heart stopped. I crept forward, every step heavier than the last, until I stood at the door. My hand hovered over the knob, shaking violently. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see, but something drew me to it, pulled me closer like a string tightening around my neck. I peered through the peephole, and I saw her, Mrs. Carson. Her skin was pale, her eyes sunken black. She stood perfectly still, head tilted at an unnatural angle. Her lips moved, but no sound came through, just the shape of words. Write her name. I stumbled back, slamming into the wall, shaking my head. No, you're dead. You're not real. The knocking grew louder, faster, violent. The door rattled in its frame, the hinges groaning as though they might burst. The journal flung itself open again, pages flipping wildly until they landed on a blank spread. The pen hovered in the air, and then it pressed down, not in my hand on its own. It began to write, letter by letter, C-A-R-S-O-N. I screamed and lunged forward, slamming the book shut before it could finish. The pen snapped in two, ink splattering across the table. The knocking stopped instantly. Silence swallowed the house again. But the damage was done. A single word remained burned into the page. Second, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face through the peephole, pale, twisted, demanding. By dawn, I sat slumped against the wall, the journal clutched to my chest, my body trembling with exhaustion. When sunlight finally pierced through the curtains, I dared to hope it was over, that maybe daylight could save me. But when I staggered to the window and pulled back the curtain, my heart shattered. There was no daylight, no Sunday, no street, only endless blackness, stretching forever, and across it, glowing faintly, was the neighbor's house. Her window. She stood there, watching me. The journal grew heavier in my arms, as though it were filled with stone. My arms trembled from the weight, but I couldn't let it go. I knew, somehow, if I dropped it, something worse would happen. I looked down, desperate for answers. A new message had written itself across the page. The second offering is complete. The third is waiting. And beneath it, faint and dripping like fresh ink, your choice decides who. The world tilted around me. My knees buckled, and in that moment, I realized the truth. It wasn't about survival. It was about obedience. The house, the void, the figure. They didn't want me dead. Not yet. They wanted me to play their game, to write, to offer, and sooner or later, I would break, because the journal wasn't just recording my thoughts, it was changing them. I stopped marking the hours. Time meant nothing anymore inside this house. The clocks ticked, but their hands spun in circles, never landing where they should. My phone screen glowed, but no signal reached it. Every attempt to call for help ended in static, like whispers bleeding through the speaker. And yet the journal always knew what hour it was. When I opened it that morning, or what I thought was morning, fresh words greeted me in thick black strokes. The third offering waits. Choose carefully. I wanted to scream, to tear the pages apart, to break the spine in half. But each time I tried, the leather held fast, like steel. The journal couldn't be destroyed. It could only be obeyed. I wandered the house in a haze, trying to think. Who was left to offer? Mrs. Carson was gone. My name had appeared once, but I had escaped, at least for now. Was there someone else? The answer came when I stood at the window again. The void stretched endlessly outside, but far in the distance, like a speck of light in an ocean of black, another house flickered into view. Not Mrs. Carson's. This one looked newer, brighter, its windows glowing faintly with warmth, and inside, I saw movement. A family, a man, a woman, and a child. Their silhouettes moved from room to room, faint and distant, but undeniably real. My stomach dropped. They weren't strangers. It was my sister, her husband, their little boy. I staggered back, shaking my head violently. No, not them, not them. The journal opened on its own, pages fluttering until they landed on a blank spread. The pen rolled across the table, poised and ready. Write their name. The words bled across the page before me. No, I shouted. You can't make me. But deep down, I knew the truth. The journal didn't ask. It demanded. And when I disobeyed, the world around me bent and twisted until my will broke. The lights flickered. The floorboards groaned. Shadows lengthened across the walls, stretching into long, spindly fingers. They reached for me, brushing against my arms, my neck, my face. Write their name, and I screamed and hurled the pen across the room, but it vanished midair, reappearing instantly on the page, upright, waiting. The whispers grew louder. I clutched my head, rocking back and forth. No, no, not my family. Please. The journal pulsed under my palm, my vision blurred, and then, just as before, my hand began to move on its own. The pen pressed to the page. Letter by letter, it began to spell out my sister's name. I fought it, every muscle in my body straining, but the harder I resisted, the stronger the pull became. My wrist twisted unnaturally, bones popping, pain shooting up my arm. I cried out, but the pen dragged forward anyway. Jena. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping, clutching my broken wrist. The journal sat calmly on the table, her name glowing faintly in the dark ink. The decision was made. At first, nothing happened. Then, far away in the distance, the house across the void flickered. The warm glow inside dimmed, shadows overtaking the windows, and then came the screams, muffled, faint, but unmistakable. A child's cry, a woman's voice, shrill with terror, a man shouting in confusion. I pressed my hands against my ears, sobbing, but the sound seeped through anyway, vibrating in my skull. Then, silence. When I dared to look again, the house was gone. The void stretched empty once more. The journal closed itself, the leather binding snapping shut with finality. On the cover, words appeared in raised, glowing letters. The third offering is complete. I don't remember how long I lay there on the floor. My body was weak, trembling from exhaustion and horror. My wrist throbbed, my throat ached from screaming. But worse than the pain was the emptiness. I had killed them, not with my hands, but with my words. By writing, by obeying. The guilt pressed down on me heavier than the journal itself. And yet, a small voice inside whispered that I hadn't had a choice, that the journal would have taken them regardless, that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't my fault, but I knew that was a lie. The choice had always been mine, and I had chosen to survive. When I finally stood, the house felt different. Colder, the walls seemed to pulse faintly, as though breathing. The shadows no longer clung to the corners but moved freely, slithering along the floor like living things. And in the silence, I realized something terrifying. The journal wasn't finished, because when I touched it again, new words carved themselves into the cover. The fourth waits. I dropped the book, bile rising in my throat. How many would it demand? How many offerings until it was satisfied? Until he was satisfied. The neighbor, the figure, whatever he was, he hadn't appeared since Mrs. Carson. But I could feel him, watching, waiting. Every choice I made brought me closer to him. And the journal wasn't just his tool, it was his mouthpiece, his law, his scripture, and I was his prophet. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in the corner of my room, staring at the journal as though it might spring to life and crawl toward me. At 3:33 a.m., the house shuddered violently, as though struck by something massive. The windows rattled, the lights exploded in showers of sparks. Darkness swallowed everything, and then his voice, low, echoing, filling the walls. 4, then 5, then 6, until the book is full. The journal sprang open on its own. Pages flipped faster than I could see, until they stopped near the end. Blank lines stretched across the page, hundreds of them, waiting. I understood then. This wouldn't end at 3, or 4, or 5. It would end only when the book was filled, when everyone I had ever known, ever loved, was gone, and when the final line was written. I knew where the last name would belong. I used to believe dawn could save me, that daylight meant safety, that shadows retreated when the sun returned. But in this house, whatever this house had become, there was no dawn, no morning, no cycle of time at all, only darkness. And the journal, when I awoke, if waking could even be the right word, it was sitting on my chest, heavy, breathing. My skin crawled at the warmth that radiated through the leather cover, like a living thing pressed against me. With shaking hands, I pushed it off, but as soon as it hit the floor, it opened. Fresh ink bled across the pages, curling into words I already feared. "The fourth waits," I whispered into the silence. "No more. I won't do it. I can't." The words shifted, black strokes melting into new sentences. "You will, or you will join them." The air in the room grew heavy, suffocating. The ceiling groaned, pressing down like the entire house was collapsing. My ears popped, and I dropped to my knees. "Please," I begged. "Not another. Take me instead." The ink swirled furiously, angry, the words reshaping into a single command that struck me like a knife. "Not yet." The floorboards beneath me rippled. I scrambled back, watching in horror as something pressed upward from the wood, distorting it like water. Then, with a sickening crack, a hand pushed through long, bony fingers tipped with jagged nails. It clawed upward, and another hand followed. Then, a head. The neighbor, or what had once been him. His features stretched, warped, his mouth split too wide across his face. His eyes glowed white, empty of pupils. He crawled halfway out of the floor, grinning at me with cracked teeth. His voice came not from his mouth, but from everywhere at once. "The fourth waits. Choose." I stumbled backward into the corner, shaking my head violently. I won't do it." The journal snapped shut, then flung itself into my lap. Its pages burned hot against my skin, branding me through the fabric of my clothes. I tried to push it away, but it clung to me, sticky like tar. The neighbor's grin widened. "Then it chooses." The room dissolved around me. Walls melted into shadow, the floor crumbling into nothing. I fell backward into the void. The journal fused to my chest. The air rushed past me, but there was no wind, no sound, only darkness swallowing everything. When I landed, it wasn't on the floor of my house, it was on asphalt. A street, my street. For a moment, hope flickered in me. Maybe I had escaped. Maybe this nightmare was over. But as I rose, heart pounding, I saw the truth. Every house on the block stood hollow, their windows black, their doors gone. The world stretched in both directions, but no horizon existed, only endless rows of lifeless houses fading into the dark, and in front of me my childhood home. No lights glowed inside, no warmth bled through the windows, but I recognized it instantly. The cracked shutters, The leaning mailbox, the journal burned against me. Its pages flew open, pen already scratching without my hand. The fourth waits inside. My blood ran cold. I didn't want to go in. Every muscle in my body screamed to run. But where could I go? There was no end to this street, no escape, only the house. My feet dragged me forward, up the crooked steps, to the door I hadn't touched in years. The knob was cold, metal biting into my palm. When it swung open, the smell hit me first. Not rot, not dust, but perfume, lilac, the scent my mother used to wear. My stomach twisted. I stepped inside. The house looked exactly as it had the day we left it. The faded wallpaper, the sagging couch, the dining table with one broken chair, but it wasn't empty. Someone sat at the table. My mother. Her hair was long and dark, just as I remembered. She wore her old blue cardigan, the one with the missing button. She didn't move when I entered, didn't even look up. Her hands rested on the table, still, pale. My throat closed. "Mom?" My voice cracked. "Mom, it's me, Mom." Slowly, her head turned. Her eyes met mine, and they were wrong. Too wide, too black. Her smile stretched too far across her face. My heart plummeted. The journal pulsed against my chest. Its pages glowed with new words. The fourth offering. "No," I whispered. "Not her. Anyone but her." But deep down, I knew this was why the journal had brought me here. This was the choice it demanded. My mother's voice crawled out of her throat, slow and broken. "Write my name." I staggered backward, tears streaming down my face. "I can't. I won't." The neighbor's voice slithered through the walls, joining hers, echoing with cruel harmony. "Write her name, or it will write yours." The pen appeared in my hand. My wrist locked, my arm raised against my will. The journal's pages glared white-hot, begging for ink. I screamed, fighting it, but my wrist twisted until I thought the bone would snap. The pen stabbed at the page, letters forming, M.A. I dropped to my knees, the pen hovering over the paper. "Stop!" I sobbed. "Please, take me instead. Please." The ink paused. The house groaned. The shadows rippled, hesitating. For a heartbeat, I thought it might work, that I could end it here, that I could sacrifice myself instead. But then the words continued, finishing the name, M-A-R-Y, my mother's name. The house shook violently. My mother's figure convulsed, mouth splitting open in an inhuman scream that rattled the walls. Her body twisted, contorting until it burst into smoke, vanishing into the ceiling. The journal snapped shut, vibrating in my hands. On the cover, new words burned into the leather. "The fourth offering is complete." I collapsed, choking on my own sobs. It had taken her. It had taken them all. And it wasn't done, because when the smoke cleared, when the shadows settled, the journal opened one last time. One sentence stretched across the page in dripping ink. "The fifth waits." I had stopped counting the days. Time had lost all meaning. The house, the void outside, the journal, the neighbor, they had become my only reality. The world I knew no longer existed. Only this endless cycle of choice and obedience. When I awoke, or rather, when consciousness returned, I found the journal on my chest again, heavy, breathing, living. Its pages flipped open without wind, settling on a blank spread. Fresh ink bled across it in thick, black letters. "The fifth waits." I collapsed backward. My chest heaved. I was numb from exhaustion, from fear, from guilt. The first four offerings still haunted me. Mrs. Carson, my sister and her family, my mother, the weight of their deaths, my forced obedience pressed down on me like lead. But the journal didn't care. It only demanded. I didn't move for hours, just sat on the floor, trembling. The neighbor didn't appear this time, at least not immediately. The silence was almost worse than his presence. I could feel him, though, watching, waiting, anticipating my next action. Finally, my shaking fingers closed the journal, but the weight didn't leave me. Its leather cover pressed like a living thing, and when I tried to set it down, it jumped into my hands again. It opened. Ink spilled across the page, forming words I could barely bear to read. Choose the fifth, or lose yourself. I wanted to scream, to run, to destroy it. But I knew that whatever I did, it wouldn't matter. The journal was in control, always. The void outside stirred. I had begun to notice that after each offering, the darkness shifted. Houses appeared, then disappeared. Streets stretched and twisted. Shadows became more tangible. They reached for me, brushing against my skin, whispering through the air in voices I could barely comprehend. This time, the void stretched farther than I had ever seen. The street outside was endless, lined with houses that weren't mine, but each contained a life waiting for me to choose. And in the distance, a house glowed softly with a warm light. Inside, I saw them, a group of teenagers. My friends. I recognized them immediately. Their faces twisted in casual laughter, frozen mid-motion, unaware of the horror waiting for them. I staggered back. "No," I whispered. "Not them. Anyone but them." The journal pulsed in my lap. Its pages flipped violently, then stopped. The pen rolled toward me. Write their names. Their felon. I screamed and pushed it away, but the pen hovered, floating mid-air, ready to strike. I tried to resist, to shake it off, but the journal was stronger. It bent me, forced my hand upward. The ink wrote. I tried to block it, to stop it, but my body betrayed me. Letter by letter, it spelled LUCASEMMADANIELSRAH. The pen pressed harder, biting into my hand, as though warning me against stopping. When it finished, I dropped it, choking, tears streaming down my face. The house in the void dissolved instantly. Shadows consumed it. Screams echoed faintly, then were gone. The air felt heavier, the void deeper, the silence suffocating. The journal snapped shut in my hands, vibrating with a terrible energy. Words appeared on the cover. The fifth offering is complete. I slumped against the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. My body shook. My mind was shattered. The realization was unbearable. I had killed my friends, not directly, not with my hands, but through the journal, through my forced obedience, and I still had not been spared. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time no longer mattered. The journal lay closed, but it was alive. I could feel it, pulsing, waiting for the next command. Then the neighbor appeared, not crawling this time, not slowly emerging from the floorboards. He stood in the corner of the room, taller than I had ever seen, limbs bending impossibly, his pale face twisted into a permanent grin. The shadows around him coalesced, forming shapes like clawed hands reaching for me. His voice, as always, came from everywhere. The sixth waits. Soon. Prepare yourself. I shook my head violently. I won't, I whispered. I won't do it anymore. The shadows rippled, reacting. The air grew icy. My breath formed clouds. The neighbor's grin widened, teeth glinting. You don't choose. The book chooses for you. I realized then that escape was impossible. Not just from the house, not just from the void, but from the journal itself. It wasn't just a tool, it wasn't just a book, it was a prison. Every name I had written, every offering I had completed, had bound me tighter. Every act of obedience chained me further to the journal's will. And with each chapter, each offering, the neighbor grew stronger, more present, more real. I sank to the floor, head in my hands, shivering uncontrollably. I remembered the first night I saw him, standing at his window, quiet, watching. And now, he wasn't just across the street, he was everywhere. And the journal pulsed in my lap, reminding me that the cycle had only begun. The fifth waits, the sixth waits, the seventh waits. My mind spun with terror. There was no way out, no salvation, only obedience, only the next offering, only the growing inevitability that my own name would one day appear at the end of the book. And when it did, I knew it would be final. I didn't sleep that night, or the next, or the one after. Hours blended into days. The house warped and twisted, the shadows moving independently, whispering endlessly. The neighbor appeared in fleeting glimpses, reflections, dark corners, moments when I thought I imagined him, but the journal never rested. It always waited, always demanded. Every now and then, a name appeared on its pages without my touch. I could feel the pull of the next offering, the inevitability of someone else's life being taken, and I realized something worse than fear. It wasn't the neighbor, it wasn't the void, it wasn't even the journal. It was me, because with every offering, with every name I wrote, I became complicit. I had already become part of the cycle, already a servant of the book, already lost, and the fifth waits, and the sixth waits, and all I could do was obey. The house had become a living entity. Walls pulsed with a heartbeat I could feel in my chest. The shadows were no longer simple absences of light. They were shapes, stretching and twisting, forming hands, faces, claws, and mouths. They whispered constantly, never silent, never giving me a moment to breathe. And the journal, it lay on the coffee table, closed. But I knew it was awake. Its leather cover seemed to pulse with life, and I could feel it humming through the floorboards, through my veins, into my very bones. When I approached, it flipped open on its own. The pen rolled across the page, stopping midair, poised and ready. Ink oozed across the paper, forming words that seemed to crawl and writhe as I read them. The sixth waits. Choose quickly. I fell backward, gasping. I had barely survived the fifth. My hands shook uncontrollably. My wrist still throbbed from where the journal had forced me to write my mother's name. My heart was shredded from guilt, exhaustion, and horror. I couldn't do this again. I wouldn't. But the journal didn't care. The neighbor appeared in the corner, taller, thinner, more grotesque than ever, limbs bending impossibly, skin stretched taut across his sharp bones. His grin, unnatural, jagged, was fixed in place. Shadows pooled around him like liquid, crawling up the walls, reaching for me. The sixth waits. Or you do, he whispered, his voice inside my skull. I pressed my hands over my ears. No, stop, I won't. But it was too late. I knew what the next offering would be, even before the journal began its writing. I tried to resist, tried to block it from my mind, but the void outside began to shift, revealing glimpses of the next victim. A woman, alone, in her apartment. She was someone I recognized, not a friend, not a family member, but someone I had encountered once years ago. A brief connection, but that was enough. Enough for the journal to mark her. The pen floated toward me, guiding my hand. I fought, screaming, but my wrist moved anyway. Letter by letter, the name appeared on the page. I tried to stop it, tried to break my wrist, but the journal was stronger. It forced me to obey. When I finished, I collapsed to the floor, sobbing, shaking uncontrollably. My chest heaved. My tears stained the carpet. The apartment in the void dissolved, swallowed by the shadows. A faint scream echoed for a moment, then silence. The journal snapped shut on its own. On the cover, new words appeared. The sixth offering is complete. I thought that maybe, just maybe, it would pause. Perhaps the neighbor would disappear, the house would calm. Perhaps I could rest. But it didn't. The void beyond the windows shimmered, revealing a new street, lined with houses. Each one contained a life waiting to be claimed, each one a potential offering. I sank to the floor, head in my hands, trembling. There was no rest, no safety, only the next, only the waiting. And then I understood something terrifying. The neighbor wasn't just a watcher, the shadows weren't just shapes. The journal wasn't just a book, they were one entity, a single, living will that I could not escape. It was patient, infinite, unstoppable, and it had planned this for me all along. Hours, days, weeks, I had lost track past. Each time the journal opened, each time a name appeared, the weight of my obedience grew heavier. My hands shook too much to hold a pen. My mind fractured into pieces that refused to think. Every scream I heard, every life I took, chipped away at who I once was. And now, the sixth waits. I could see her in the void, alone, laughing softly, unaware of the terror approaching. My chest constricted, my stomach turned, my throat burned. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes, to do anything, but the journal wouldn't allow it. Write her name, it whispered. I fell to my knees, fighting against the invisible strings binding my wrist. The pen moved anyway. Letter by letter, it spelled out Klara. A scream ripped through the void as her apartment disappeared, swallowed into darkness. The shadows retreated momentarily, coiling like snakes around the corners of the room. The neighbor grinned, white teeth glinting. The sixth offering is complete. I lay on the floor, broken, shaking, silent except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. The journal pulsed softly in my lap. It was alive, waiting, watching. I realized then that the fifth, the sixth, the first, they had all been training. I had survived, yes, but only because it wanted me to learn, to obey, to understand the rules. The seventh waits, and I am running out of time. I don't know how many more offerings there are. I don't know how many names remain. I don't know if I will survive to write my own. But one thing I do know, the journal is patient, the neighbor is patient, and the book will take everything from me, everything I love, everything I am, until it is satisfied, and there is nothing I can do to stop it. By the time the seventh wait came, I had become something I barely recognized. I wasn't fully human anymore, not entirely. My hands shook constantly. My eyes were rimmed with permanent dark circles. My voice was hoarse from screaming at shadows that never left. The house had consumed me as surely as it had consumed the others. The void outside had stretched, twisted, and I no longer knew where it ended. My own street, my own home. They were memories, nothing more. The journal lay open on the floor in front of me, ink already swirling across the page, forming words before my gaze could even settle. The seventh waits. Choose now. I stared at the words, my breath caught in my chest. I had no more tears left, no more strength. My body trembled, yet I was paralyzed, unable to look away. The neighbor appeared again, taller than ever, limbs bending at impossible angles, a grin that stretched across his pale, sharp face. He was a shadow among shadows, yet more real than any person I had ever seen. The whispers in the air coalesced into his voice, hollow and cruel. The 7th waits. Or you do. I sank to the floor. My hands buried my face. I couldn't do it. I couldn't write another name. I couldn't kill again. Not someone else. Not anyone. But the journal pulsed in my lap, heavy, insistent, alive. It didn't care about my weakness. It didn't care about my fear. Choose. Through the void beyond the windows, I saw them. A group of strangers, wandering the streets. Not my friends, not my family, just ordinary people, living lives I would never know. And yet the journal had marked them. The 7th offering was among them. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes and stop, but I couldn't. The journal's weight was absolute. Its ink glowed faintly, almost breathing. The pen rolled across the page, hovering, waiting for me to obey. I screamed. The shadows surged. The neighbor's grin widened, teeth glinting in the dark, limbs twisting, shadows slithering around him, forming jagged shapes that reached for me, brushing my arms and face, whispering, "Write their name." I shook my head violently. "No, stop. I won't." The journal snapped itself open. Pages flipped furiously until they landed on a blank spread. The pen hovered above it. "Write their name, or it writes yours." I froze. I had feared this moment. I had known it was coming, the inevitability of my own name being next. I couldn't do it. Not anymore. I had survived 6 offerings. I had obeyed 6 times. I had watched my loved ones disappear and my friends vanish. I had lived with the guilt of what I had done, and now the choice was mine. I trembled on the floor. My wrist stiffened as the pen moved in the air. Letter by letter, I felt it tugging my hand forward, but my body refused. I collapsed fully on my side, crying silently. "Choose on one my," I whispered, barely audible. I won't. Not this time. The void shifted violently. The shadows shrieked. The neighbor lunged closer, twisting impossibly through the air, reaching out for me. The pen shot toward my hand, hovering inches above the paper. The journal pulsed violently, then slammed itself shut. Silence fell. For the first time, absolute silence. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning anymore. When I dared to open my eyes, the void had changed. The street was gone. Every house had disappeared. The shadows had receded, leaving me in a dimly lit room. The neighbor was gone. The journal lay on the floor, closed. No words, no pen, no demand. I wanted to hope, but the journal pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. I realized then what had happened. By refusing the 7th offering, I had survived. For now, but at what cost? The neighbor's voice echoed in my mind. Refusal is temporary. The 7th will wait. And when it strikes, you will be ready. I lay on the floor, exhausted, broken, barely alive in every sense of the word. My mind wandered over the past offerings, the lives I had taken, the lives I had failed to protect. The guilt weighed heavier than any chains. I had become a shadow among shadows, a servant of the book. And yet, I had resisted. I had survived. But the journal waited. The 7th waited. And I knew, deep down, that I could not run forever. Because the book was patient. The neighbor was patient. And the void was infinite. I got up slowly, shaking, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. I stared at the closed journal. I knew what it would demand next. I knew that sooner or later I would be forced to write again, to obey, to choose. The 7th waits. the 8th waits, and each offering brought me closer to the final line, my own, and when that line was written, I would be gone. I sank to the floor again, staring at the journal. My hands hovered above it. I knew I had a choice: refuse, resist, fight, but I also knew it would come back. Always, because the book never forgets, the neighbor never forgets, the void never forgets, and the offerings never end, until it takes everything, until it takes me, and the 7th waits, and the 8th waits, and the book waits for me to obey. The house had changed again. I could feel it in every creaking floorboard, every wall that pulsed with its own heartbeat. The shadows were denser now, swirling in the corners like living smoke. I no longer recognized the furniture, the layout, or even the floor itself. It had warped into an endless maze, stretching beyond the limits of my perception. And the journal sat in the center of the room. It waited. I approached it cautiously. The leather cover was warm, almost pulsing like a heartbeat. I could feel its anticipation. The pen rolled across the page as if alive. Ink bubbled at the tip. The 8th waits. Choose. I collapsed to my knees. My throat was raw from screaming, my arms trembling, my mind fractured. The first 7 offerings haunted me. Mrs. Carson, my sister and her family, my mother, my friends, the strangers I had been forced to write. The guilt pressed down on me heavier than any weight I had ever known. I could not do it again. I could not. But the journal didn't care. The neighbor appeared once more. His form had grown, more grotesque than ever, stretching impossibly toward the ceiling, limbs bent backward. His skin had become translucent, revealing something like veins of black ink running beneath. His grin was fixed and jagged, his eyes hollow. "The 8th waits," he whispered, and the shadows around him moved in response, slithering up the walls, crawling across the ceiling, reaching for me. I sank to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. "No, not again. I can't. I won't." The journal snapped open violently. Pages flipped at a speed I could barely track. The pen floated toward me, poised, ready. "Write their name, or yours will be next." I froze. I had feared this moment. I had known it was coming. I had always feared that if I refused, it would choose for me. And now I could see it. A figure emerging in the void outside. A life marked. A woman, young, alone, ordinary. Completely unaware of the nightmare approaching. I tried to look away. I tried to stop the journal, but it pulsed with a force I could not resist. My body moved against my will. Letter by letter, my hand began to spell the name. M-A-R-I-A. I screamed. I clawed at the floor. I tried to break my wrist, but the pen pressed onward, relentless. The shadows reacted instantly. The woman's apartment in the void dissolved, consumed by darkness. A scream echoed faintly, then vanished into the void, leaving silence in its place. The journal snapped shut. Words appeared on the cover. "The 8th offering is complete." I sank to the floor, sobbing, exhausted beyond measure. My mind teetered on the brink of collapse. I had survived 8 offerings. 8 lives had been claimed because of me, and yet I was still alive, still breathing, still trapped. I thought, maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to end it. Maybe there was a loophole, some way to destroy the journal, some way to stop the neighbor. But the journal pulsed in my lap, alive, waiting, patient, infinite. The neighbor's voice whispered in my mind, "The 9th waits, and it is closer than you think." I shivered. I realized the truth. This was no longer just about obedience. It was about inevitability. Every offering, every name, every choice had been leading me to this moment. I wasn't just a survivor, I was a participant in the final act. I spent what felt like days or weeks crawling through the warped corridors of the house. I no longer slept. The void outside the windows shifted constantly. Shadows moved independently. Whispers became louder, forming sentences I couldn't fully comprehend. And through it all, the journal pulsed, waiting. I realized I couldn't fight it, not with strength, not with will, not with anything. Resistance only delayed the inevitable. The ninth offering, the final chapter, was coming, and when it came, it would demand the ultimate price, my own name. The pen rolled across the page again, hovering over the surface. The ink shimmered, alive. The words appeared. The ninth waits. Prepare yourself. I fell back, heart hammering. My body shook uncontrollably. My thoughts scrambled. Every memory of the previous offerings assaulted me. The faces, the screams, the guilt, every life I had taken, every choice I had made, every survival instinct I had obeyed, everything had brought me here. The neighbor appeared in the center of the room. Shadows pooled beneath him like black water. He leaned closer, impossibly tall. "You see now," he whispered. "The book always wins. The void always claims. The offerings never end until the final line is written." I realized then the terrible truth. The final offering wasn't just another name. It was me. I sank to the floor, sobbing, shaking. My mind screamed, "I won't. I can't. Someone else must take it. Please." Not me. The shadows coiled closer. The neighbor's grin widened. The journal pulsed violently. The void outside the windows warped, twisting into impossible shapes. I could see faint glimpses of the previous victims, their faces watching me, whispering silently, "It's your turn. It's always your turn." I realized I had no choice. The ninth waits. The final line waits, and the book waits for me to obey. I knew the next moments would define everything. I could resist and face unknown consequences. I could obey and end the nightmare for now, but at the cost of completing the cycle. I clenched my fists, tears streaming down my face. I stared at the journal, pulsing like a living heart. The neighbor whispered again, "It is closer than you think. Are you ready?" I had no answer, only terror, only inevitability, only the knowledge that the final offering, the one that would claim me, was almost here, and the eighth waits, and the ninth waits, and the final line waits for me to write it. The air was thick with anticipation. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Shadows stretched across the walls like living fingers, and the floor beneath me pulsed as though it had a heartbeat. The journal lay in front of me, its leather cover warm and almost breathing. Alive with a dark hunger, I could feel pressing against my chest. I had survived 8 offerings. 8 lives had vanished because of me. 8 screams had echoed in my ears. 8 faces haunted my mind. And now, the final one awaited. The pen rolled toward me, obedient to some malevolent force beyond comprehension. Its tip glistened with ink that seemed to writhe, alive, ready to obey the next command. The final offering. Write, or be written. I collapsed backward, hands shaking. My throat ached from screaming. My body was raw from fear, exhaustion, and guilt. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't write another name, not another life, not mine. But the journal didn't care. The neighbor appeared again. His form was monstrous now, larger, taller than the ceiling itself, limbs bending in ways no human body could. Shadows pooled at his feet, rising to join him in the air, twisting and writhing like a storm of darkness. His eyes empty, black voids fixed on me. His grin stretched impossibly wide. "The final waits," he whispered, voice echoing inside my skull. "The book is patient. It is inevitable. Are you ready?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to flee, but I had nowhere to go. The house had no walls. The void stretched infinitely in every direction. The shadows moved closer, coiling around me, whispering, "Write or be written." I pressed my hands over my face, tears streaming. "No, not me. Please, someone else. Take me instead." The pen rolled across the page, poised and ready. The ink shimmered as though alive. The journal opened itself wider, pulsing with malevolent anticipation. Write the name, or lose everything. I realized then what the final offering would be. I had known it in the back of my mind since the first. The inevitability had always been there, lurking. The book had been preparing me, bending my will, teaching me obedience. The final name wasn't someone else. It was mine. I screamed into the void. My voice echoed endlessly, swallowed and twisted by the shadows. "No, not me, I won't." But my body betrayed me. The pen rolled into my hand, my wrist twisted upward. I felt the ink bleeding across the page before I could even look. My hand moved against my will. The words began to form. N-O-W. I fought, screaming, thrashing, clawing at the floor. The shadows lashed at me. The neighbor's grin widened impossibly. "It is time," he whispered. The pen pressed harder. Letter by letter, my name was spelled. E-V-E-R-E-T-T. I screamed again, but the ink did not stop. The journal glowed faintly, pulsing with dark life. The air grew thick and heavy. The void outside the windows warped violently. My body convulsed. Pain shot through every nerve. And then, silence. The shadows vanished. The neighbor was gone. The void shrank back into the corners of the room. The house seemed to sigh, a deep exhalation that rattled the walls and floor. I lay on the floor, trembling, barely able to breathe. The journal sat in front of me, closed. On its cover, new words appeared, glowing faintly in the dim light. "The final offering is complete. The cycle ends. The book waits no more." I couldn't comprehend it. 8 lives, 8 offerings, and my own name written. I had survived all the previous horrors, only to reach this point. I should have died, but somehow the cycle had ended. The neighbor did not appear. The shadows did not lash. The void did not stretch. For the first time, absolute silence reigned. I stood slowly, knees shaking, hands trembling. The journal sat quietly on the floor. I touched it cautiously. It was inert, lifeless now. The weight that had pressed on my chest for weeks, months, was gone. I realized I was alive, truly alive, not because I had obeyed, not because I had survived, but because I had endured. The book had demanded the final offering, and I had given it. I had paid the ultimate price, my name, but it did not claim me. The neighbor, the void, the shadows, all gone. For the first time, I could breathe. I walked to the window. Outside, the world was normal again. The sun rose over streets I recognized. Children played. Cars passed. Life went on. And yet, inside me, the memory of the journal, the neighbor, the offerings lingered. I had been changed. My innocence was gone. My soul was scarred. But I was free. The final line had been written. The cycle had ended. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, barely believing it. It's over. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I slept. And when I awoke, the journal was gone. The shadows were gone. The void was gone. The neighbor was gone. Only the light remained. And for the first time, I was no longer afraid.